Welcome to the 6-5 podcast. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, joined by my always esteemed and excitable podcast host, Patrick Moorhead. And we're here for the second time this week doing the 6-5 podcast. And we're adding some fun to our show now as we've taken it live on multiple channels concurrently. I believe we are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter, we are live on YouTube, and we are live on LinkedIn. And so we appreciate all the community that is joining us here today. And for all of you that are listening to this later, thanks a lot for tuning in. So we got a great episode today, Pat. It's Friday, and that's something to smile about. It's been one heck of a week. This is election week 2020. So if you're listening to this in like 2022, you probably remember what tumultuous, crazy times we are in. But tech goes on, and the 6-5 must go on with it. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's Friday. I feel good. It was a big week. A little bit less crazy work-wise. I think a lot of people that I work with were either taking time off or crying or laughing. So it's been a nice kind of week to take a nice deep breath. And I know that sounds nuts because it's crazy election week, but it's the truth. The previous 2 weeks were nuts.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it's laughing and crying at the same time. There's that new Drake song. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, and sometimes we're doing both at the same time. But yeah, it's been chaotic. I think the first couple nights of the week, I stayed up very late. The initial election night, really watching it, soaking it all in. I'm a policy guy, so I want to understand the policy. I don't get as emotionally attached as some, but you know what? We don't really talk about politics on this show, unless they directly impact the state of the tech industry. So for now, maybe we'll come back to that. But let's talk about what's going on in tech. Now, before we jump in, just a reminder, the 6-5, 6 topics, in-depth analysis. We try for about 5 minutes each. I have to admit, Pat and I are long-winded, and because it's our show and our platform, we sometimes talk longer because
we can do whatever we want.
Unlike when we go on TV and there's some bug in our ear or in the host ear saying, "Hey, segment's over, get them off the tube." We just keep talking until we feel we've said everything that needs to be said. We hope you enjoy that. Quick disclaimer, as always, the show is for information and entertainment purposes only. So while we will talk about publicly traded companies, we will potentially talk about earnings results and, things related to investments. Do not take anything we say as an investment advice. Please do not do what we say. In fact, maybe do the opposite. But again, not even advising that. Speaking of, let's get started, Pat. And it's kind of a dual topic. So, we wanted to on Monday talk about Qualcomm and its big FTC win when the FTC's en banc hearing request got denied. But it was also Qualcomm's earnings week. And so I think we can kind of duel up on this one. And I'll start with a little bit of commentary here, but there's a lot here. So I'm going to start talking about some things, Pat, on a really broad level, but I'm going to let you dive into some of the stuff related to the growth in its QCT business. Broad level, you heard me mention the en banc thing. So over the last couple of years, Qualcomm has been in a battle, a series of battles, regulatory, around the world with just about every FTC on the planet renegotiating its licensing deals. That's in China, that was in Taiwan, that was in Japan. It also had a massive undertaking when Apple decided to pursue a legal action against the company. That was settled. And as I think many of you saw, a 5G Apple iPhone announcement last week. Well, guess what? Powered by Qualcomm. So those two companies have made up. But there was one sort of outstanding battle that was left to be fought, and that was with the FTC. Not enough time to give the whole backstory, but initially the FTC won their ruling in the Ninth Circuit when Judge Lucy Koh essentially was told Qualcomm they were going to have to negotiate their licensing deals, and it was going to be in much less favorable terms to Qualcomm. That ruling was overturned in the Court of Appeals. However, the FTC did not seem to be satisfied with that, and the FTC then requested what's called an en banc hearing and wanted to get in front of a larger panel of judges to see if this could be brought back to life, and therefore pushing Qualcomm to, Pat, have to battle further over their licensing structure. Bottom line, this thing got unanimously rejected, did not go through, end of story, bigger fish to fry for regulatory space right now. And so Qualcomm seems to be in the clear. Now, the company had a huge result. huge earnings and huge revenue growth. Revenues in the 30% to earnings in the 80s on a lot of different things, which I'm going to let you talk about in a moment. But one of the things that I've said for a long time, and you and I got to talk to Steve Mollenkopf, the CEO, the night after earnings, was the stock in the company had been sort of under this gray cloud, this dark cloud for a while because of all this regulation. And now that this is behind it, you can tell the company's more focused. It's delivering way more on the promise of the new technologies like 5G. But it's also really encouraging to its investor community and to its partner community to know that they're not going to get bought out by some crazy Broadcom deal when they're at their weakest point. And there's not some regulatory that's looming in the background that's going to take the company in a really risky direction. All right, I covered a lot about the case and the regulatory path, but there was a ton of news on the actual earnings results and the growth itself. I'll let you cover that.
Yeah, it sounds good. And the good news about this one, Daniel, is there is a lot of oxygen left in the room here. So what I'd like to focus on in Qualcomm is its growth areas. You know, Qualcomm is really known as the modem company, right? 4G, 3G, 5G, and also its intellectual property that comes with it. But what I was really glad about is that Qualcomm actually broke out for investors for the entire year, every quarter in 2020 fiscal and fiscal 2019, which was actually a lot more than I expected. And what it did is it pointed out that Qualcomm has non-modem, non-IP businesses that are actually bigger than many companies, entire companies. And I think that's pretty cool. Two that I want to focus in on. The first one is an RF front end. So for those who aren't necessarily engineers out here, it takes two to tango to make your phone work. It requires a digital modem, and then it requires an RF front end to talk with the base station. And the two of those actually make the phone connect. Qualcomm said that for FY20, their RF front end business was $2.4 billion. And, you know, it's funny. I did a little bit of a victory lap on this one, Daniel, because I had talked about Qualcomm being as big as possibly Qorvo, Skyworks, and Broadcom here. And I ended up being right. And, you know, you look at the comparisons, you break out mobile RF FE, and Qualcomm is larger than most of them. And I think that's a huge deal. Automotive, right? Qualcomm talks about its $8 billion in backlog, right? And I think most of that will start hitting in 2022. But the cool part is they have a $640 million business right now. And a lot of that has to do with telematics and in-dash. And surprise, their automotive business is bigger than NVIDIA's. So just crazy. And just to round that out, their IoT business, which is think of smartwatches, Bluetooth LE, is a $3 billion business, which, you know, you have to line up against Silicon Labs and also Synaptics. So big surprises here, Daniel. You know, the Uber question, is Qualcomm tired of winning yet?
Well, it's a question that, again, the company wasn't having the luxury to answer for about 2.5 years while it was under just a series of duress. But the tech never wobbled. It was always going to be the next winner. And in America, in the United States, when it comes to the intellectual property and patents associated with 3GPP, which supports 5G, Pat, Qualcomm's in a great position, and the company's, it needs its business models protected to make sure the U.S. continues to innovate on the mobile front.
Quick question from our audience here. 5 years down the line, if SpaceX satellite internet program works, how relevant is 5G? This is an easy one. Satellite is going to be low bandwidth, and 5G is going to be high bandwidth. And I'll pretty much leave it at that. I mean, even when you compare low band 5G, comparing it to satellite. Now, for the rural communities is probably where the big question is going to be. And I think in rural communities, what SpaceX is doing is going to be competitive. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, everyone that's listening to this, not live, we are adding live elements to the show. So on demand, we will be filling in thoughts, and we have a lot of great, we have a great community of very smart folks that will ask us questions. And if you are watching this live and we don't take your question live, realize we are trying to keep our show somewhat on schedule. And so we may or may not get to your question immediately. We may get back to you later through, say, social channels. All right, let's move on, Pat. I have a second topic. This one won't take quite as long as the Qualcomm topic, and it sat for a week because in the interim, Microsoft had its earnings, and its earnings were a blowout. So right before its earnings, though, the company quietly, somewhat, announced a massive new partnership with Adobe and a company called C3.ai. Now, C3.ai is not a household name yet, but Tom Siebel of Siebel Systems is a name that is known in tech for a long time when it comes to software. And he's been sometimes called the godfather of CRM. So he's been around a long time. So the three companies essentially are partnering together to drive this growing customer data platform space. And it's interesting because Adobe and Microsoft both do extensive customer insight work, and there's some significant overlap in their customer data platform. However, this isn't the first time these two companies have partnered together. Adobe and Microsoft also partnered together in ODI, which is the Open Data Initiative. And these companies, I believe, have come to recognize that their capabilities are better together. Well, C3.ai is bringing an interesting new twist, and that's verticalizing the CRM offerings and building CDP and customer relationship management stacks that are AI powered, that are basically focusing 100% on industries. So as opposed to the typical horizontal approach, these are algorithmic and model-based that are pre-built so that companies can deploy a model for financial services, a model for healthcare, a model for manufacturing that uses the best practices of building, these AI algorithms to simplify how customer data insights can be generated and do it somewhat seamlessly with all three companies' data models and sets working congruently. It's a big step. And, I think we've kind of hit this pivotal moment with CRM. Clearly, it's a Salesforce competitive move. This is something that these companies have been working very hard to do, is to continue to push the business away from Salesforce and more towards Microsoft, Adobe, and now C3.ai. I do think, Pat, one thing that this also does really well is taking together enterprise and what's the word, extraprise, meaning there's this massive volume of data that lives outside of our businesses. And a big part of what these models are doing is incorporating the data from things like social media, things from unstructured data across the web. And so using this partnership, these models are not only using predictive and analytics that are capable of using all the system data that companies have, extra prize. It's also using all the data that lives outside that could be valuable. So say, for instance, a trend in the oil and gas industry that's going on largely may help a company better predict this timeline of when a sale would be complete of capital equipment because of trending net asset values or slowing of fracking or major shifts that are going on are being included into these models. So it's a really interesting disruptive element. And it was, in my eyes, it's encouraging to see these companies that in some ways compete working together to deliver better solutions that are going to help enterprises grow faster and make better business decisions.
Yeah, Daniel, good breakdown. You didn't leave me a whole lot of oxygen in there with it, which is fine. But what I will say is I do think more competition in CRM is good. Salesforce has taken a horizontal approach for a long time, so it makes sense to me that one way to chip away at their lead is to go vertical, and going vertical might take an investment. But if you have that capability, then do that. I think this is good for Microsoft, and I think we've seen with Oracle that going vertical with CX is a very positive move.
Yeah, and sorry for hogging, but guess what? I'm going to give you the floor now because Pat, we've been long waiting to talk about the Cisco Partner Summit, and you had a little bit more opportunity to spend at the event. So I'm going to let you
Yeah.
go all the way on this one. And by the way, feel free to leave me no oxygen. I'll still find something to say. So let's go
Daniel,
to
I know you always want the last word, and so do I, which is why we go 10 minutes long.
Hey, we're running out of time. Let's stop talking. No,
exactly.
All right,
okay.
All right. On to the next one.
Cisco Partner Summit, typically in Las Vegas, but we're not traveling. Brought together 11,000 certified partners from 152 countries. So Cisco is a very partner-focused company. Some companies are as big as countries now, so excuse me. But they do 90% of their business through the channel. So this makes perfect sense. So one thing they did is they simplified their partner program. I mean, at Cisco, partner programs were like kudzu. I mean, they were everywhere. But what the company did is it simplified it down to a very focused set from the capabilities of their partners. And just on the bookends, you might have a reseller that it's all about inventory, right? And not a whole lot of value add. And then on the other side, you'll have an integrator. And if you step back and look at how many more businesses Cisco's in, no longer are they just the switch company or the Tor company, right? They're the largest security company on the planet by revenue. And they are all over as a service and all over what I'll call monitoring software for multi-cloud. So with that, you need to change your partner program that best represent the needs of your customer, your product portfolio, and what they did. And the other thing they did is they did bring out some new, talking about vertical here, targeted webex solutions to support government. Two in particular. One is webex Legislate, and Cisco doesn't take credit for it. Maybe they're not allowed to, but when you see Parliament in the UK, or if you see, the UN talking, the reason it looks a whole lot like WebEx is because it is WebEx. What they did is they came out with something called Legislate, which is designed especially for legislature. And it's a substitute for a person in chamber or on the parliamentary floor. And they've even said it's better than being there. I don't know if that's reality, but, Daniel, when you and I talk over Desk Pro, there is something, I hate to use this word, it sounds so marketing, but a little magical about using the two. And it's just better. They also brought out a product called Connected Justice. And I got the chance to interview one of their customers, Elkhart, Indiana County Director of IT, Matthew Dietz. And it was a great conversation. And we talked a little bit about the Cincinnati Reds. I used to live in Cincinnati back and forth, but he told me how essentially they're, without even upgrading the backhaul, they are using the 9400 series of routers, how they upgraded everything, and they're able to essentially run the courts virtually. And obviously that is important during the time of COVID. So I like their move. Vertical is where it's at when it starts to look, if there's a horizontal commodity. And by the way, I don't think we're there yet on these types of solutions. I just think that Cisco is getting a leg up on where this is going. And they're strong in these markets anyway, so it just makes sense.
Yeah, Cisco's always put on an impressive partner summit. The company has built a massive ecosystem of very successful businesses that have really centered their entire business model around Cisco. They were one of the companies that really early understood both the training model and the partner model. So you remember the Cisco Platinum and Gold and Silver partners, and then you had the various different certifications. And this really lended it credibility and gave these systems integrators and companies a way to build a successful business and practice around Cisco. So good to see that, Pat. You did talk about WebEx Legislate, and I'll just make a quick comment. I think that was a really interesting example, going back to what I just talked about with C3.ai and vertical solutions. Collaboration is not one size fits all. And as we've seen with companies trying to use products like Zoom for legislation and for councils and congressional. I don't know if anybody saw Argentina when the one guy had his girlfriend on his lap, totally inappropriate, but did not know what he was doing. These people and systems do, there is user error proneness in all of it. So having the capability to, whether it's layers of encryption that you may not need for everyday enterprise communication, but you need for verticals like financial services or government, where data is very sensitive, as we are hearing in the media all day long right now, or just being able to, deliver something that fits certain needs and handles things like roll call, voting, priority. So it was really good stuff, Pat. So that was a great breakdown. I got another one for you, because this is one that you attended that I didn't have a chance to get to yet. I do have the on demand, but Lenovo TechWorld. And by the way, Lenovo had a blowout quarter, very impressive earnings, Pat. And that's not our topic today. And if you get a chance, let's go ahead and throw up the banner for topic 4, Lenovo TechWorld. Pat, your show.
Yeah, so Lenovo doesn't have nearly as many events as some of the other infrastructure and PC vendors. So I thought it was really important to dive into this. This was competing with Cisco Partner World as well, with which made it a little bit difficult. But I was able to cover both of them, and I just wanted to hit on 2 big announcements. First off is some brand new Think systems for high performance data analytics. Lenovo has a history. Lenovo, if you remember, bought the IBM X series business, and they were heavy duty into big data. And you've seen Lenovo keep market share, and in some cases gain it in this space. They're doing a lot of multi-socket. There's very few people who have 4 sockets, and 4 sockets for, let's say, SAP are important because it's a scale up application. So, they brought out a bevy of upgrades, and whether it's NVMe, new Intel Xeon Golds, NVIDIA V100, allowing up to 8 single width GPUs. Think about that, 8 NV100s in a single chassis. That is some serious beast mode. It looks like Lenovo also re-upped their alignment with SAP. SAP is beleaguered as of late, but it does have a very big installed base of ERP customers. And if you look at Lenovo's strength in big data and SAP's on-prem strength in ERP, and also SAP's desire to expand in China, this makes a lot of sense. The new news around this alignment was the alignment between the as a service. So Lenovo TrueScale with SAP. What that means is that customers can pay as you go for SAP on Lenovo on-prem. Now, the irony about this is I'm pretty sure Lenovo was the first to deliver this, even though there was another announcement that came before this with HPE. At least that's what some of the customers are telling me here. So they discussed a lot of other things at TechWorld. They showed off again the folding PC that unfortunately was held back by the lack of an operating system with Windows X. But I am looking forward to getting my grubby hands on that.
Grubby, he says. Lenovo is on a good trajectory right now, Pat. It was a promising partnership, the SAP news, but overall, the company continued to diversify, and I think it's another business we should probably spend some time breaking down at some point for the audience, just because I think a lot of people think of Lenovo as the old x86 business for IBM. They think of the laptops, people think about that, but the company has a really significant data center business. Its intelligent device business is significant. It's doing things at edge and also in managed services that are pretty interesting. So again, an interesting company that's got a trajectory. It's growing faster than a lot of OEMs out there. That's what their earnings showed this past week. And so probably a company we can, dive into just a little bit more. in future episodes. However, we got to get on to the next topic, Pat. And by the way, I got one more for you to kick off before we take this one home on topic 6. But AMD, last week we talked about a Xilinx acquisition and a pretty massive earnings beat. And the company's doing more. Big Navi. What's going on?
Yeah, so a little background here. As you've seen, AMD is very strong in CPU, notebook, desktop, and server. The big question mark is, could AMD bring that level of success to its GPUs? Now, AMD has very solid market share in mid-range and entry-level discrete GPUs, but the big question is, could they actually give NVIDIA a run for their money at the highest performance consumer GPUs? It's literally been 10 years since that was the case. Now, the Radeon 7 got close, but it had high bandwidth memory. It was very expensive and limited in the amount that they actually made. I think they were putting $200 bills in every one of them that they sold. I actually have one in my system right now. But with that said, could they do this? And at least on paper, on what they showed, the 6800 XT, the 6800, and then in beast mode, the RX 6900 XT lined up pretty competitively against NVIDIA at a lower price. Now, I feel like I've seen some of this commentary before from AMD. I think we do need more competition. So I am hoping that this is actually true, because there hasn't been a whole lot of competition at the high end as it relates to gamers. And one thing, let's just say AMD wins on non-ray tracing, non-AI performance, then that begs the question, well, what about ray tracing games? I think at the end, I think NVIDIA will likely have higher performance ray tracing performance, but I think due to AMD being in Sony and Microsoft consoles, we will likely have more titles to support ray tracing by AMD. Now, that is my educated guess here, and we're going to have to see if this is the case. Now, the other thing that came up too, and I love this, AMD's Frank Azor, previously from Dell, did a great video, which I urge everybody to look at, showing the combination of the new desktop 5000 series connected to this new Radeon 6000 series. So it's kind of AMD plus AMD type of configuration. Now that we may not have seen, for 12 years or 15 years. I'll have to go back and do my notes. But my final question is, I'm wondering how this bodes for an improved data center portfolio using this 7 nanometer big Navi, because that's very important. And quite frankly, on the training side, NVIDIA has that all to themselves. And I think that has a lot to do with their valuation.
Absolutely, Pat. You talked about oxygen, not a lot left here. So, I'm just going to throw that one back at you like a grenade. But in all serious, look, what I see here is competition. NVIDIA, as you just suggested, hasn't had a lot in this particular space. And so, Pat, I don't think we've done an AMD sort of NVIDIA, gaming GPU comparative 6.5 commentary in over a year. I mean, there used to be a lot of that kind of back and forth, and it seems like over the last year, NVIDIA's gained a lot of momentum here. So it's good to see AMD stepping in and continuing to put pressure, which I think will only continue to, develop better and better technologies that gamers are going to love. And I'm not a gamer. I do play FIFA sometimes, but I do find the technology to be pretty outstanding. When they show the way ray tracing and these technologies, Pat, and AI are now enhancing these games like Fortnite, it is insane, the level of depth and quality of imagery. And so I love watching the innovation and the competition and the leapfrogging. So good stuff here. All right, let's take us home. Let's go back to enterprise for a minute, Pat. That's where my heart sits most fondly. So another new big partnership is the thing. I guess in enterprises, partnering works, unlike in government sometimes. But IBM and AT&T, so two very big, often blue organizations, have decided to come together on a partnership around cloud, around edge, around 5G. So the two companies essentially announced that they're going to work together, IBM and AT&T, to use IBM's cloud satellites and leveraging Red Hat OpenShift on AT&T's networks. What does this really do? Well, obviously, we know that a ton of the data, a ton of the opportunity to scale out, especially with 5G and with cloud, is data that doesn't live in the data center. So, you've got AT&T's multi-access edge computing, which is their low latency, private cellular edge environment. But you need to be able to run the apps effectively and efficiently using all the data and do it seamlessly. Well, Red Hat, that's basically what it was built for. It's built for hybrid. It's built to be able to use OpenShift, give flexibility, bring applications to any environment using all the data, no matter where it resides, and do it securely, and do it on open hybrid architecture. So that's really what's going on here. And I think it's really interesting, Pat. Bottom line for me, and like I said, I'm trying to be brief and try to not eat the entire meal on each topic. But I'd like to get your take too, is that, these partnerships are not going to be limited or exclusive in any capacity. IBM and AT&T, there will be partnerships with other carriers, but it was a very nice groundswell for two companies that have big ambitions to A, bring edge and hybrid together, and B, leverage the benefit of 5G. So, I see this being a big play in some regulated industries where the companies can tap into IBM's HyperProtect services and their core abilities to manage data from the core to the edge in a secure fashion. I also see, the ability to expand upon, this isn't part of it yet, but like the cloud packs and things that, that IBM has been doing to simplify the deployments so that companies can more rapidly get their hybrid architectures up in place and benefit from all that AT&T is doing with their edge network on 5G.
Yeah, so good breakdown, Daniel. Two things come to mind for me. First of all, IBM and its vertical clouds, right? We saw the financial cloud, and this is the carrier cloud. And the second one is this edge computing piece. I think AMD was a little late to the party with its satellites, but IBM has a tremendous amount of compute at the edge already. At almost every bank branch you walk into, many restaurants and things like that is IBM endpoints going all the way up to the cloud, and in some cases even the mainframe. The second thing is this strikes me as very similar to the Verizon AWS deal that they did at the last reInvent, which was essentially MEC and being able to tie a cloud and a carrier together. And competition's great, right? And who would have guessed that would be what AT&T would have chosen IBM? And I think it bodes very well for IBM here, because I think many people may have expected that it was a different company. I know there is some Azure here. If you remember, there was an Azure relationship that was announced as well. IBM does promote a lot its multi-cloud capabilities, and I think that very well could be the reason that they got this business. Last year at the last in-person Think, I think Randall Stevenson was on with Ginny. So there's been a very long-term relationship between the two companies. I know that on the mainframe side, IBM does the transaction processing for AT&T. So great stuff, Daniel.
Yeah, I'll tie a few last strings together here on this particular one. IBM's cloud, obviously it's an IaaS operation in itself, but it's so much more than that. And so when you mentioned Microsoft, you mentioned AWS, OpenShift and Red Hat really was IBM's tie-in to participate in vast cloud ecosystems that maybe don't use IBM Cloud or IBM Cloud's infrastructure. And that was a really huge move. It's a huge move with the company's impending split off. It's a huge move for the company's future growth. IBM is doing well with certain enterprise workloads in certain, in certain verticals, but the scale that AWS, 11.6 billion a quarter in revenue, and the scale that Azure have taken, IBM needed to find a way to participate in the cloud when it's the IBM infrastructure and when it isn't. And that's what Red Hat has really done here. So as you mentioned, these kinds of partnerships and IBM's hybrid approach is definitely its key to achieving the success and the growth that the market and the company has in its own, ambitions. So we'll leave it there, Pat. Great show.
Hey man, what's on next week? A big week next week. We have the big Oracle CX event with Larry, and I love it. Dreamforce the same week, baby.
You think that's an accident? Come on.
Gosh, I don't know. The invitation I got said with Larry. So this means that's code for Larry's going to lean into this big time.
Is it a shared stage, Benioff and Larry getting out there together?
I don't think they could be on the shared stage, and I don't know. My guess is that Benioff is probably hiding in his basement. I'm just joking, of course. We also have Apple Silicon Macs. I mean, my expectation is, Apple's going to promise the world. We're just going to have to see what they deliver.
Yeah, Pat, it's going to be a big week next week. Dreamforce is always a huge thing. Interesting to see how the response is going to be to, I don't know where the Hawaiian dancers and the flames and all that stuff's going to happen when you have to do it online. Look, if
Ohana, baby. Ohana.
If Salesforce can't pull off the ultimate virtual event, then who could? What company could? And yes, Pat, absolutely. I actually am working on a piece right now. I will be writing about the Apple ARM Silicon as the company is officially going to be announcing its move away from Intel chips and onto its own chips using ARM architectures. Going to be a big week. I think this could be a monumental, pivotal inflection point for the Mac business and for the PC business going forward. But if you want to know more about that, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to subscribe to our show. You're going to have to come back and tune in later because I promise you we're going to be talking about it. But Pat, for this episode here today, November 6th, 2020, the 6-5, we are over. See you later.